Hey everyone, welcome back to our 5-week bootcamp. In today's session, we are going to dive deep into a very important concept in programming, loops. Loops are the backbone of efficient code, allowing us to repeat actions without writing the same lines over and over. Trust me, you will love how loops make your life easier. Now, we are not going to dive straight into code today. This will be a theory session. We will go over the basics of for, while, and do while loops. Don't worry, we will have a practical session in a separate video where we will code together and see how these loops work in real time. Let's start with the most important question. What exactly is a loop? Simply put, a loop allows us to run a block of code multiple times. Imagine you need to perform a task over and over again, like printing numbers, processing a list, or updating a values until a condition is met. Writing out that same task every time would be a nightmare, right? That's where loops come in. They let us repeat tasks automatically. We have three main types of loops in Java: for loop, while loop, do while loop. Each one has a special use case, and in this video, I am going to break them down for you. Let me give you a sneak peek before we dive deeper. So, let me ask you, have you ever had to repeat a task so many times that you just wished it could do itself? Maybe you're processing a list, counting numbers, or even filling out forms. Well, loops are going to be your superpower for those exact scenarios. Alright, now that we have built up some excitement around loops, let's break them down one by one and understand how they work, starting with the for loop. The for loop is the most commonly used loop, especially when you know exactly how many times you want to repeat a task. It's perfect when you are working with a fixed number of iterations or counting. Let's look at the basic structure. Here, what's going on? Initialization. You set up your loop variable like a counter. This part runs only once at the beginning. Condition. This is checked before each iteration. If it's true, the loop runs. If it's false, the loop stops. Update. After each iteration, the update happens. Often, this means incrementing or changing the loop variable. Next, we have the while loop. The while loop is a bit more flexible. It runs as long as the condition you gave it remains true. Unlike the for loop, where you know exactly how many times the loop will run, the while loop keeps running until you tell it to stop. In the while loop, there is just one main thing you need to keep in mind: the condition. It's checked before each iteration, and if it's true, the code inside the loop runs. If it's false, the loop ends. Finally, we have the do while loop. This one's a bit different. The key difference is that in a do while loop, the code inside the loop will always execute at least once. Even if the condition is false, that's because the condition is checked after the code runs. The do while loop is really useful when you want the code run at least once. For example, maybe you are asking the user for input and you want to ensure that they enter something before checking if it's valid. So to recap, for loop best when you know how many times you need to loop. It's perfect for counting, iterating through arrays, or other fixed iterations. While loop. Use this when you don't know exactly how many times you will loop, but you know the loop should continue as long as a condition is true. Do while loop. Great when you want to ensure the loop runs at least once before checking the condition. Each loop has its own strengths, and knowing when to use each one will make your code more efficient and readable. In our next video, we will get hands-on and write some real code together so you can really get the hang of how these loops work. But for now, I want you to think about the loops we covered today and imagine situations where you might use them in your own programs. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the bell icon. Thank you.